So we learned about the basics behind creating visuals already. Now it's time to dive deeper into the visual appearance of our charts right here. I will dive deeper here in the next lecture. In this lecture, I want to get started with two specific features though: data colors and conditional formatting. Both are related to each other and they refer to the colors of our lines here in the left chart or of our columns here in the right chart. Let's select the left chart first and let's now change these so-called data colors. For this, you have to access the Format menu. The Format menu can be found next to our Fields menu. And as you know, the Fields menu is here below our visuals, this left menu here. We used it quite a lot. And here you have the Format options then. As I said, we'll dive into many of these options in the next lecture. Right here, I want to focus on to the data colors, this option here. If you open this menu, you see you now can find all your data that you have in your visual, specifically our data that we added via our legend. So this legend colors here, Africa, Asia, Europe, and so on, which are, well, the same that we have here for our lines. And as you can imagine, if you click right here now, you can simply change these colors to any default colors. Or if you go down here to custom color, you can also add RGB codes right here to change that color or pick the color dynamically right here. So this is one way how to change the data colors, and if you don't like what you did, like in my case maybe, you can revert it back to the default by clicking right here. So for the line chart, we have relatively limited options right here. But as for many visuals in Power BI Desktop, we have different options depending on the visual type we are using. So if I now select the column chart here, you see that first the menu is a bit smaller, right? We only have the default color, which is set to this blue at the moment. If you open the menu now, you can of course change the color. You can, for example, select this purple tone right here, and then all the columns here in our chart have this color then. This is one option. However, you can also individually tailor the color of these columns. For this, you simply switch this here to on. And now you see at the moment, well, we have the same colors, but now we can follow the same approach that we saw previously for the line chart. So you can now individually tailor the colors for your different columns in the chart. So far, so easy. Same thing down here. If you're not happy with what you did, you can revert it to the default. However, besides the data colors, I also mentioned the conditional formatting option. We didn't have this option in the line chart. As I said, some options are limited or restricted to specific visuals. But here, next to default color, if you hover over here, so you cannot see a thing, but if you hover there, you see these three vertical dots. And if you click onto these, you get the conditional formatting option here. Let's select this. And now a pop-up opens. In here, we can now dynamically change the colors in our column chart depending on the parameter we define in the end. Let's dive into some basic options here. The first option is here, how do we want to change the look of our visual? So either by the color scale, which is what we want to do here, either by specific rules or by a field value. Well, I'll stick to the color scale as I think this is a really common and nice option. So let's say the colors should change in our visual. We can then say which field this should be based on. Right here, this says sum of population by default. This is a bit misleading here, especially when it comes to this part, because what it simply means is if I open this menu and select the corresponding field, you see it's just our population field in the end. The reason why it says sum of population is, if I open this again, that here we by default have a summarization which is the sum. We didn't dive into summarization so far, but at the moment the default setting for this population summarization right here means that Power BI Desktop takes the data, for example, for the different regions, and then calculates the sum of the population for these regions. We'll dive into summarization a bit deeper throughout this module, but generally you can tell Power BI Desktop where it should take the data from, here from the population table, and then how it should aggregate this information. And this aggregation is in the end the summarization. And if we close this menu now, we can then specify the summarization right here in this menu. The default one is the sum, so this is basically doubled here, you could say. But you could also say that you don't want to have the total population count for each region, but that you might want to have the minimum, the average, or the maximum value, just to give you some examples here. In our case, we will just use the sum. So Power BI Desktop should take the regional data and calculate the cumulative value for the population that we have for the corresponding region. The next option is our default formatting here. This simply applies to data where we don't have information for. This is not the case for us here, therefore we can stick to S0 here. You also have other options like don't format or show 0 values or blank values in a specific color, but we don't have a problem, so we can stick to the default here. And now we have to define the minimum and the maximum value. For the minimum, we can either take the lowest value or a custom value here, which we can then enter. I'll stick to the lowest value. And for the maximum value, well, we can do the same thing. And now we can define two base colors, and then Power BI Desktop will automatically create a gradient from the minimum color to the maximum color. So for example, if I choose maybe a brighter orange here, and then here also a darker orange, then this will be the gradient that we have. If you activate the diverging option, you can activate a third value if you want to. I think this doesn't look too shabby, so let's maybe keep this one. With that, if we press OK, we see that the look of our chart changed a lot. We now have the maximum value for Asia, well as before, with this darker orange color here. Then we have the middle-sized regions like Africa with the, well, slightly brighter color, and then we have the rest with the brighter colors down here. And if you remember our hierarchy that we defined in our chart, then we can of course go down right here, because this gradient or this conditional formatting actually is also applied for all our hierarchy levels, so it also works for these. Let's go up again though. And here in the formats field, you can also see that you applied such a conditional formatting by this button here. If you click onto it, you can access the menu again. Leave it so it's fine. And if you don't want to have that conditional formatting anymore, you can just click right here and revert it to the default value. So these were the first formatting steps in Power BI Desktop now. Of course, as you saw it in the formatting menu here, we have plenty of options to explore, so let's dive deeper into the formatting options in the next lecture.